Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at a website called Mustang Classics,
Oh yeah, Mustang Classic.
dedicated to classic Ford Mustangs.
You got it.
Uh,
All the way up to 1969.
Okay. So,
The originals, the creators, Philip and Nicholas, they're really focused on historical accuracy and originality.
so let's unpack this a little bit.
believe you.
What's the big deal about originality? Why not tricked out, customized Mustangs?
Well, think of it this way. These early Mustangs, they represent a very specific time in American car culture,
Okay.
restoring them to their original condition. It's like preserving a piece of history.
Like a museum exhibit you can actually drive.
Exactly. And Mustang Classics does a great job of explaining why each model year is significant. They even dive into the challenges of distinguishing between certain years because sometimes the changes were so subtle.
Wait, so you're telling me there are Mustangs out there that even experts have trouble identifying?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
For example, some years might have only a tiny difference in the grille or the trim.
But those details matter to enthusiasts who value authenticity.
Right.
Mustang Classics breaks down these variations and helps you understand what to look for.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So we're talking about hardtops, convertibles, and fastbacks, right? Those were the main Mustang body styles from back then.
You got it, and each one has its own unique appeal. The hardtop was the more practical, everyday option. The convertible, of course, was all about open-air driving and that wind-in-your-hair feeling.
Yeah. And the fastback, that's the one that really gets the pulses racing, right?
Definitely. The fastback had that sporty, aggressive look, thanks to that sloping roofline.
Mm-hmm.
Think Steve McQueen and Bullitt Pure.
Yeah.
Cool.
I can see why those are so popular.
Yeah.
But what about the different model years? You mentioned it's tough to tell them apart sometimes.
Right, so let's take the fastback as an example. From 1965 to 1969, there were some significant changes under the hood, even if the exterior didn't change that much year to year.
Right.
You had everything from the small block 289 V8 to the legendary 428 Cobra Jet.
The Cobra Jet. Didn't that engine turn the Mustang into a serious muscle car?
Oh, absolutely.
All right.
The Cobra Jet was designed for drag racing, and it made the fastback incredibly fast in a straight line. It's a big reason why those models are so sought after by collectors today.
So it's not just about looks, it's about the engine, the history, and knowing those little details that set each year apart.
Exactly. And that's where Mustang Classics really shines. They help you understand those nuances. They're like those friends who know way too much about a topic, but in a good way.
I like those friends.
Yeah.
But what about Philip and Nicholas, the creators of the site? What's their story?
Well, they're clearly passionate about these cars. Philip's the tech expert, and Nicholas has a background in advertising and design. So they've combined their skills to create this really impressive resource.
They're not just building a website, they're building a community, right? I remember reading something about meetups and photo shoots.
Yes. They want to bring Mustang enthusiasts together to share their knowledge and, of course, show off their cars. It's a pretty cool idea. Creating a space for people who are as passionate about classic Mustangs as they are.
So it's more than just looking at pictures online. It's about meeting up, sharing stories, and geeking out over these cars. I can see why someone would love this site.
Absolutely.
Right.
And what's great is they don't assume you already know everything about Mustangs.
Right.
They break down the different models, the history, even the challenges of identifying specific years. It's like a crash course in classic Mustang appreciation.
All right, so we've got a website dedicated to classic Mustangs, run by two guys who are clearly obsessed with getting every detail right. We've got hardtops, convertibles, fastbacks, and some seriously powerful engines lurking under the hoods of some of these cars. What's next on this deep dive?
Well, now that we've kind of laid the groundwork, let's dive into some of the specifics that make these classic Mustangs so fascinating.
Sounds good to me. Where should we start?
Let's go back to the fastback for a minute. Remember how I mentioned that the 1967 model was arguably the most iconic?
Yeah, the one that got a major redesign, wider stance, more aggressive look.
Yeah.
That was a big year for the Mustang, right?
Absolutely. And that redesign wasn't just about aesthetics. It actually improved the car's handling and aerodynamics.
So it wasn't just about looking cool, it actually made the car perform better.
Exactly. And that's what's so great about these early Mustangs. They were designed with both form and function in mind. Take the fastback's sloping roofline, for example.
Okay.
It not only looks sporty, but it also helped reduce drag, making the car faster.
So it's like they were thinking about how the car would move through the air, even back then.
Absolutely. And that attention to detail is what makes these cars so special. They were designed to be driven, and they were designed to perform.
Now, I remember you mentioning the 428 Cobra Jet engine. That was available in the 67 Fastback, right?
Yep. And that engine was a game changer.
Yeah.
It was specifically designed for drag racing, and it turned the fastback into a serious contender on the strip.
So we're talking about a car that could not only handle well on twisty roads, but could also smoke the competition in a straight line.
Exactly. And that versatility is part of what made the Mustang so appealing to a wide range of drivers. It could be your daily driver, your weekend cruiser, or your track weapon, all in one stylish package.
That's pretty impressive. But I'm curious about the convertible. What were some of the key changes and features that made it stand out?
Well, unlike the fastback, which was all about performance and sporty looks, the convertible embodied a different kind of cool. It was about freedom, open-air driving, and that feeling of the wind in your hair.
Yeah, there's just something so classic about cruising down the road in a convertible with the top down.
Absolutely. And the Mustang convertible nailed that feeling perfectly. It had that classic long hood, short deck proportions, and a stylish interior that made you feel like $1,000,000.
Did the convertible go through any major design changes during those early years?
Oh, definitely. Just like the fastback, it received a significant redesign in 1967.
Okay.
It got wider, more muscular, and even more stylish.
So it was keeping up with the times, design-wise.
Exactly. Ford knew they had to keep the Mustang fresh and exciting, so they made sure it evolved with the changing tastes of the time. But they never strayed too far from that core Mustang DNA.
That makes sense. So even though the Mustang was evolving, it always stayed true to its roots.
Precisely. And that's one of the reasons why it's remained such an icon. It's a car that's constantly evolving. Yet it always feels like a Mustang.
Now, I know we've talked a lot about the fastback and the convertible, but what about the hardtop? That was the original Mustang body style, right?
That's right. The hardtop was the more practical, everyday option.
Okay.
It didn't have the sporty looks of the fastback or the open-air freedom of the convertible, but it was still a stylish and affordable car that appealed to a wide range of buyers.
So it was like the entry-level Mustang, but it didn't skimp on style.
Exactly. It still had that classic Mustang look with long hood, short deck proportions, and that iconic pony emblem on the grille.
And was it available with the same range of engines as the fastback and convertible?
Pretty much. You could get a hardtop with everything from a fuel-efficient 6-cylinder engine to a powerful V8.
So there was a hardtop for everyone, whether you were looking for a practical commuter car or a sporty weekend cruiser.
Exactly. And that's part of what made the Mustang such a success. It offered something for everyone.
You know, while we're on the topic of the different Mustang models, I have to bring up something that really impressed me about Mustang Classics.
Oh, what's that?
It's their attention to detail. I mean, they really dive deep into the specifics of each model year.
Absolutely. Remember how we talked about the challenges of identifying certain model years? Well, Mustang Classics breaks it all down for you.
Yeah.
They don't just tell you that a certain year had a different grille. They actually show you pictures and explain the subtle differences.
Right.
And they don't just focus on the big, obvious changes. They also point out the little details like the trim variations, the different wheel options, even the color choices that were available each year.
It's like they're giving you a guided tour of Mustang history, pointing out all the little things that most people would never even notice.
And that's what makes them so valuable for enthusiasts. They're not just presenting a surface-level overview. They're giving you a deep dive into the nuances that make each model year unique.
It's like having a personal Mustang expert at your fingertips.
Exactly. And that's the kind of knowledge that separates casual fans from true enthusiasts. It's about appreciating the little details, the things that make these cars so special.
Well said. And it's that kind of passion and attention to detail that makes Mustang Classics such a great resource for anyone who's interested in learning more about these iconic cars.
Absolutely. They've done a fantastic job of capturing the essence of the Mustang and sharing it with the world.
So we've talked about the fastback, the convertible, and the hardtop. We've discussed the challenges of identifying different model years, and we've touched on the incredible level of detail that Mustang Classics provides.
What else is there to explore in this deep dive?
Well, I think it's time we talked about the heart and soul of these cars, the engines.
Ah, yes. Those legendary Mustang V8s. That's a topic we could spend hours discussing.
And we might just do that. But before we get into the specifics of each engine, I want to talk about what made those early Mustang engines so special in the first place.
What's fascinating here is that those engines weren't just powerful. They were also relatively lightweight and compact.
So they weren't just brute force, they were nimble and responsive too.
Exactly. And that combination of power and agility is what made those early Mustangs such a joy to drive. They weren't just fast in a straight line,
Yeah.
they were also fun to toss around corners.
That's what I love about classic muscle cars. They have that raw, visceral feel that you just don't get with modern cars.
Absolutely. And the Mustang's engines were a big part of that. They had a distinct sound, a certain rumble that sent shivers down your spine.
Yeah, you could hear a Mustang coming from a mile away.
And that's part of what made them so cool.
Yeah.
They had a presence, they had personality, and they weren't afraid to let the world know it.
So let's talk about some of those specific engines. What were some of the most popular and influential V8s that were available in those early Mustangs?
Well, you can't talk about Mustang engines without mentioning the 289 cubic inch V8.
Ah, yes. The 289, that was the engine that really put the Mustang on the map, wasn't it?
Absolutely. It was introduced in 1965, and it was a significant upgrade from the previous 260 cubic inch V8.
What made it so special?
Well, for starters, it was more powerful. It produced up to 271 horsepower, depending on the configuration.
That's a pretty healthy number for a car that size, especially back then.
Exactly. And it wasn't just about raw power. The 289 was also incredibly smooth and refined.
So it wasn't just a brute, it was also a gentleman.
Precisely. And that made it a very versatile engine. It was equally at home cruising down the boulevard or tearing up the racetrack.
Now, I know there were a few different versions of the 289. Can you break those down for us?
Sure. The base version of the 289 had a two-barrel carburetor and produced 200 horsepower.
Okay, so that was the more economical option.
Exactly. Then there was the K-Code 289, which had a four-barrel carburetor and a high-performance camshaft.
Ah, the K-Code. Now we're talking. What kind of power were we looking at with that one?
The K-Code 289 produced 271 horsepower, which was a pretty impressive number for the time.
And I bet it sounded amazing.
Oh, absolutely. The K-Code 289 had a distinct roar that let everyone know you weren't messing around.
Now, I know we talked about the 428 Cobra Jet earlier, but can you give us a little more background on that engine?
Sure. The 428 Cobra Jet was introduced in 1968, and it was designed specifically for drag racing. It had a massive four-barrel carburetor, a high-performance camshaft, and a set of beefy connecting rods and pistons.
So it was built for pure power and speed.
Exactly, and it delivered in spades. The 428 Cobra Jet was officially rated at 335 horsepower.
Officially? You mean it was actually more powerful than...
Oh, yeah. Many people believe that Ford underrated the horsepower figures for insurance and marketing reasons. Some estimates put the actual output of the 428 Cobra Jet closer to 400 horsepower.
Wow. That's a serious amount of power, even by today's standards.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it made the Mustang a force to be reckoned with on the drag strip. In fact, the 428 Cobra Jet was so successful that it helped to cement the Mustang's reputation as a true muscle car legend.
That's incredible. So we've got the 289, the K-Code 289, and the 428 Cobra Jet. Were there any other notable engines from those early years?
Oh yeah, there were quite a few. But I think we've covered some of the most important and influential ones for now. I think it's time we shifted gears a bit and talked about another aspect of Mustang Classics that really impressed me.
Sounds good to me. What did you have in mind?
Well, remember how we talked about Philip and Nicholas's vision of creating a community around their love for classic Mustangs?
Yeah, the meetups, the photo shoots, that kind of thing.
Right. Well, they've actually gone a step further and are working on creating a space where enthusiasts can share their knowledge and expertise.
So it's not just about showing off your car, it's about sharing your passion and helping others learn about these cars.
Exactly. They're planning on having forums, articles, and even workshops where people can come together and learn from each other.
That's fantastic. It's like they're creating a living, breathing encyclopedia of Mustang knowledge.
Precisely. And that's what makes this project so special. It's not just about the cars themselves. It's about the people who love them and the stories they have to share.
I think that's what makes classic cars so fascinating. It's not just about the machines themselves. It's about the history, the culture, and the people who have been touched by these cars over the years.
Absolutely. And Mustang Classics does a great job of capturing that. They're not just showcasing cars, they're celebrating a legacy.
And I think that's something worth celebrating.
I couldn't agree more. Now, I know we've covered a lot of ground already, but there's still so much more to explore in the world of Mustang Classics.
Where should we go from here? Well, you mentioned earlier that Mustang Classics is all about originality and authenticity. What does that actually mean in the context of classic cars?
It's a great question. You see, for a lot of car enthusiasts, especially those who modify their cars extensively, originality might seem a little boring. But for folks like Philip and Nicholas, it's about respecting the car's history.
So instead of slapping on aftermarket parts or trying to modernize the car, it's about preserving it as close to how it rolled off the assembly line as possible.
Exactly. Think of it like restoring a vintage photograph. You wouldn't want to add filters or digitally alter it, right? You'd want to preserve its original beauty.
Yeah, I see the analogy. So original paint original interior, even down to the details like the radio and the wheels.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
And it can be incredibly challenging to find parts for these cars that are truly original.
Hmm.
But that's part of the fun for enthusiasts who value authenticity. It's like a treasure hunt.
Oh, I bet. So how does Mustang Classics promote this idea of originality? Do they have examples of perfectly preserved Mustangs on their website?
They do. They have a whole section dedicated to showcasing original Mustangs. And they explain why certain details matter, like the specific type of paint used, the stitching patterns on the seats, even the way the engine compartment is laid out.
That's pretty amazing. They're not just showing off pretty pictures. They're educating people about what to look for when it comes to originality.
Exactly. And I think that's really important, especially for younger generations who might not be as familiar with these older cars.
It's like they're preserving a piece of automotive history, not just for themselves, but for future generations.
Absolutely. And they even talk about the challenges of restoring a classic Mustang to its original condition. Sometimes parts are simply impossible to find, so you have to get creative.
I bet that takes a lot of research and dedication.
Oh, definitely. But for people who are passionate about these cars, it's worth the effort.
So we've talked a lot about the specifics of classic Mustangs, the different models, the engines, the challenges of originality. But let's zoom out for a second. Why do you think these cars, even decades later, still capture people's imaginations?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I think it's a combination of factors. First, there's the nostalgia factor.
Yeah.
For many people, these cars represent a simpler time, a time when cars were more than just appliances.
Yeah.
You know?
They were symbols of freedom, individuality, maybe even a bit of rebellion.
Exactly. And the Mustang in particular was a car that was designed to be fun, to be driven, to be enjoyed. It wasn't just about getting from point A to point B, it was about the experience.
And those powerful V8 engines certainly added to the experience, right? There's something about the sound of a classic Mustang engine that just gets the blood pumping.
Oh, absolutely. It's a visceral experience.
Yeah.
And it's something that you just don't get with most modern cars.
And then there's the design. Those classic Mustang lines are just timeless.
You're right. They have a certain elegance, a certain flow that still looks stunning today.
Yeah, it's like they captured something special, something that transcends time and trends.
And I think that's ultimately what makes classic cars so appealing. They're not just machines, they're works of art. And they represent a connection to the past, to a different era. And websites like Mustang Classics help us understand and appreciate that connection even more.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one key takeaway you'd want our listeners to walk away with?
I think it's this. Classic cars and Mustangs in particular are more than just vehicles. They're cultural touchstones. They're pieces of history. And they're sources of endless fascination and enjoyment.
And if you want to learn more, explore the nuances, and really geek out on these cars, Mustang Classics is a fantastic place to start.
Absolutely. They're passionate, knowledgeable, and they've created a truly amazing resource for anyone who's even remotely interested in classic Mustangs.
So there you have it, our deep dive into the world of Mustang Classics. We hope you enjoyed the ride.
Thanks for joining us. Until next time, keep those engines revving and those passions burning.